Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So this video is going to be a little bit different than what I've done traditionally. And I'm going to be converting and repainting this GM&O MTH Protosound 2 RS3 into a Rutland RS3, much like I've done with this one here. And so I did this one about a month ago and shared some of the pictures and the process on social media, but really didn't video it because it was my first time doing anything like that. So now that I've got a little bit of a process worked out, I want to share the process that I'm using with you guys. And if this is something that you want to see more videos of, let me know and we can do that. Or if you just want to see more running sessions, we can do that too. But either way, I hope you enjoy. So a little bit about how I got this model and why I chose this for a repaint project. This is, as I said, an MTH PS2 RS3, and this is from around 2010, I believe. I picked it up at a train show about a year ago from a dealer that bought it out of a collection, and it has some damage to it. So you can see some of the paint damage here. Obviously, I'm going to repaint it, so I don't, that's not really a problem for me. But the fuel tank did have some battery acid damage to it. So in this fuel tank, you've got the speaker here and then the 3-volt battery over here to support the boards. And the battery had actually leaked, which I've never seen that before in a MTH engine. I've seen that with the TMCC or Lionel engines where they just use a 9-volt. There's some pictures out there of 9-volt batteries exploding in engines, which is a little bit scary. But I've never seen that with an MTH engine. So I got a new fuel tank from MTH Parts and Sales, and I think all in I've got about 150 bucks in this engine. So given the damage and really I just needed a donor, that's a great deal. A new one would cost me twice as much. So overall, we got a pretty good starting point here. The Rutland had 9 of these engines, and Weaver made this model here, probably 20 years ago, I would say now. And, in my opinion, this is just not as good of a model, to be frank. The paint job on it is good. It does have the Rutland paint, but it has TMCC and it has the old TMCC without cruise. So it's really hard to run. From what I understand, these are notorious for having motor issues. And I do run it, but it's hard to run it without cruise. And to be honest, an ERR cruise board nowadays costs as much as what this whole model cost me with the PS2 boards in it. So in my opinion, it just really doesn't make sense to put cruise in this or try to find another one of these. They're really hard to find to begin with. So this one, I was fortunate, I inherited it from my grandfather, and he bought it brand new when Weaver announced it. But otherwise, I don't know that I've ever seen another Weaver Rutland RS3 for sale. So that's kind of why I've taken to to repainting these models instead. I think they're better models, and especially for the value that you get, I think you really can't beat it. So just for comparison here, this was actually a Northern Pacific RS3 that I repainted to Rutland. There's a couple of things with it that aren't great, and I will learn from here on this next one. But some things like these decals are actually a little bit different color than the paint that I used for the stripes, so we'll improve that. This one has a different style horn, so I've got to figure out how I'm going to do that. I know the Rutland had 9 RS3s, so I'll have to see what is, I believe this is prototypical, but they might have had a couple with this style horn too. So worst case scenario, I can always buy the horn and drill a hole in the cab and put it in there. But this is kind of what we're shooting for with some improvements. So let's start taking this engine apart. All right, so we're going to disassemble this engine. Now, this is going to be a little bit different because actually I need this piece here is actually the frame. So it's this thick piece of metal, and I actually need to paint that. So that's a little bit tricky, but we'll address that at the end. For now, I'm gonna take the shell off, the cab, the handrails, and probably the pilots. I'm gonna soak them in alcohol, and we'll soak them overnight. maybe for a couple days, worst case scenario, and see if we can't get all this factory paint off. So let's do that. So we've got the shell off here. We've got all of our handrails. They've got some little tiny screws holding those suckers on, but we got them off. And this is really all that we have left. So we got a frame, some boards, trucks, and pilots. I think I'm gonna leave the pilots on for now. They've got these molded in brake hoses here that make it really hard to get the decals on them. So the decals end up chipping, and that's probably the biggest thing I'm not happy with the other engine. So I've kind of got two options here. I can either try to figure out how to grind these off and maybe get a flat surface. Well, I guess three options. Grind these off, get a flat surface, try to find some RS1 pilots, which don't have this molded in detail. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like MTH Parts and Sales has them available, so that's probably, maybe that's not an option. Or I can just decal over them and make the best of it. So we'll see how the project progresses here and what I end up doing. But we've got a nice shell. As I said, it does have some paint damage, which is not a big deal because all this is going to get stripped off anyway. So I got to take the cab off here, and then we'll soak this in some alcohol. So we've got our alcohol here. I stick this in a Rubbermaid container. This is just 97% isopropyl alcohol that I bought 4 or 5 containers of at CVS. And I seal it and stick it in my garage or a dark corner of my basement and let it soak for a couple days. Now, the reason I strip the paint off is because you can see, especially with MTH diesels, you can see there's the paint on here is really thick. And you know, even when you prime over this, if you use a really thick primer, you still end up being able to see the outline of the old letters and the old paint job on the engine. So I would rather not do that with an engine. You know, with freight cars, I don't typically strip them unless there's some crazy design on there that I think is really going to come through. But if I'm going to put the effort into disassembling this engine, repainting it, and everything, I want it to be done right. So we will put that in there for now, and we'll come back and flip them, you know, maybe tomorrow or in a couple days. I've got the shell here. Like I said, I've got to figure out what to do with this horn, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. There was some tread on here on top of the shell. For whatever reason, you know, maybe other than the handrails, the metal doesn't strip very well. And I'm really not worried about those pieces of tread. They're going to get repainted. They're going to get primed and then repainted green anyway. So not a big deal. The number boards here, these won't come off with alcohol. When it's done and we just have it down to a plastic shell, I'll take some lacquer thinner and these will wipe right off. And then we've got a blank slate to start from. So we'll let this guy soak probably overnight. And then we'll check on it here. So stick the handrails in and seal it up. Now, I didn't soak the pilots because honestly, there is no really, you know, lettering or numbering or anything on those that I'm worried about getting off. So I'm just going to take them off, prime them, and paint them. So that's a learning from the last time. All right, we're back. So this has been soaking in 97% isopropyl alcohol now for about 24 hours. So I wear gloves for this because it's pretty messy. You can see the paint's still on there, but actually take an old toothbrush and just kind of gently brush it here, and it'll come off. It should loosen up pretty freely. So let's give it a shot. So you can see here it comes off pretty easy. So we've got most of the paint off here. You can see there's a couple areas where it's a little more stubborn, and that's typical. The way that I have this in here, you know, there's always a part of the shell that's exposed and not necessarily soaking. So my guess is some of those stubborn areas, you know, may not have been soaked in the isopropyl alcohol. You can see the cab came out pretty good, so I'm actually going to take the cab out and we'll let that dry. The handrails and things, you know, I guess you may not necessarily have to soak these. The paint is on here pretty thick. The reason I do it is because, you know, I'm gonna put primer over this and then more paint, and they can look really chunky, and you know, some of these have holes on the shell that they need to fit into to be secure. So, you know, I don't want these to look like they're, you know, too thick or have some paint buildup on them. So I like stripping them down. Now, as I said in one of the other clips here, the brass is a little bit harder to get the paint off of. So this paint is soft, but it's not quite ready to come off yet. So we're gonna let this soak for a little bit longer. We're gonna rotate the engine, keep it upside down here, and I took the cab out, so that looks pretty good. So it's been about 3 days here, this stuff soaked. So 2 days since my last update. And everything came out pretty clean. You know, pretty happy with the shell. Didn't expect any issues there. I did remove the horn and filled the hole, so we'll prime over that and paint it. And then I ordered a new horn from MTH, so we'll have to drill some holes in the cab roof here to put the horn there. The brass pieces here, so the brass handrails, I forgot about this from the last time. The paint comes off the brass pretty easily, and that's really the reason why I was doing this. As I said, I just don't want a lot of paint buildup on some of these fine detail pieces. But the actual metal and some of the support pieces here, the paint didn't come off of. So I really, you know, I tried on a couple pieces here to kind of scrape it, and it did come off, but I've got a little bit of a rough edge here now. So I've got to go back and probably take some lacquer thinner and try to smooth this out, but that's okay. I'm also gonna here try to remove, you can see I have the pilot, and I'm gonna try to remove some of these brake hoses, because as I showed you with my other one, they are really difficult to decal over. So I'm gonna give that a shot here in a minute. I've got a Dremel, and we'll see if we can just grind them off slowly but surely. So pretty happy with how these came out. I had to change the bit that I was using. I tried these guys and they weren't aggressive enough, and ended up needing to go to something a little bit more aggressive. But, you know, I really just need a flat surface. I just need something that I can prime, paint, and decal over. So I think once we get all that done and the dull coat on there, you know, I don't think you'll see some of these little divots and things. But I'm excited about how this came out. This is awesome. So I'll have to, if this goes well, I'll have to try this with my other RS3. I'll go back, take the decals off, and try this again. So one more thing here that we do need to do before I prime everything is I need to do the frame as well, because this outside strip here is all visible and will need to be green. So I'm gonna need to prime that, and I wanna take the motors and the electronics off, as well as the trucks. I probably don't need to do that. I could probably mask it, but to be honest with you, it's not worth the risk. I'd rather take the extra time and take the stuff off and not risk, you know, getting some overspray or something on one of the boards. That's the last thing I need. Maybe it'd be fine, but it's not worth the risk. So let's go ahead and do that. So we got everything primed, and I actually started priming it with a light gray primer that I had, and then ran out of it. So I had to go to some dark gray. I think it'll be fine. The green that we're gonna use is pretty dark, so it shouldn't be an issue. But you can see everything came out pretty good. Some of these spots on the handrails here, this bottom piece actually mounts under the frame, so you don't even see it. So some of that red bleeding through is not an issue. But we're gonna go ahead and mix up. This is a custom blend that I did. I took REA green, Railway Express Agency green, and added black to it. And just kept adding it until I got a mix that I liked that matched for Rutland green. It took some trial and error, but I'm happy with what we got. So I mixed up 2 ounces of it so that we can use it for the previous RS3 that I did, and then for this one. We've got quite a bit left here. So here we are, everything's painted. I've got 3 coats on all this. I do have to go back, and some of the handrails are a little bent. So I'm gonna have to bend those back into position, and then I'll have some spots to touch up. All right, so it's been a while since I've worked on this project, coming back to it. Everything is masked. This is always the worst part of this, or the hardest part. It's trying to get all these lines straight, trying to get the chevrons right. All that's done by hand, so it is usually done a couple times to try to get it right, but I think we've got it, happy with it. So we're gonna get painting here. So here she is with the masking all off after painting. You can see we've got some overspray in a couple spots. The cab is gonna go here, so that'll cover up those spots. And then some of the lines on the chevrons specifically there, especially on that one side, are not super clean. But that's okay, that's fine. This is gonna get dull coat anyway, which will wash a little bit of it out. And, you know, perfect is the enemy of good in this case with what I'm trying to do here. So, you know, I could go back, mask everything off and try to touch those up, but the likelihood of success for me in doing that without damaging the paint further is probably pretty low. I learned that from the last engine that I did. So we're gonna call it good. I'm gonna get some clear coat on all this stuff right away because the way that I painted this, I really tried not to handle it too much before I have the clear coat on it. But we obviously have a mix match in paint thickness, right? So the stripe is gonna be thicker and have a little bit of a lip here where, you know, it overlaps with the green. So that makes it really prone to chipping. And I had some chipping issues previously where I got the masking off on my last engine. Everything looked good. You know, I had it on my workbench, moving it around a little bit. And, you know, as I just handled it with my, just with my hands, the paint started to chip. So I want to get clear coat on it right away, try to protect it, and then we will, you know, work on the cab. So I've got to get the stripe on the cab to match and line up. So we will do that next, and then on to decals. Maybe one more thing here. You can see on the handrails, the brass pieces, for whatever reason, when I mask it off and then I pull the masking off, no matter what kind of masking tape I use, I always get a little bit of paint chipping. So I'll go back and I will touch that up, right? I really don't want to see bare brass, but that's easy enough to do. So let's do that too. So we got our cab here, masked, painted, and all good to go. So have it clear coated. So everything's all ready for decals. It matches up perfectly with the shell. I touched up and clear coated all the handrails, so they are good as well. So I'm waiting on decals. They should be here soon. And as soon as I get them, we will finish this engine up, get the decals on there, seal them with some dull coat and put everything back together, and then we're done. All right, so everything is now decaled. You can see there, the color matches pretty well. Pretty happy with how that came out, actually. I had Jim from Highball Custom Graphics here send me his Road Switcher Rutland set and then just darken up the color a little bit to match. So it's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good. And I'm really glad that I ground off some of the molded in details here because this looks way better than what I have on my other engine that I did. So I'm actually gonna go back and redo those pilots. But I'm really happy with how these came out. So we'll have to see how it looks when it's all assembled. But as of right now, I've got decals on, and then I do a thin coat of gloss or semi-gloss over the decals just to build them up a little bit and hopefully try to hide that lip that you get on the decals. So I'm gonna go over now with a light coat of dull coat. I'm gonna put the engine together and then we'll dull coat it a little bit more. So the engine's pretty much back together here, but obviously I need to put the number boards back in. I found the easiest way to do this is to pop these little plastic pieces out. And then I cut out number boards, decals from Taichi. They make a sheet you get with a whole bunch of random numbers on it. And it looks like this. So you get a big sheet. I get a couple different sizes. I get O scale and S scale, and that gives you different sizes for different size number boards. But you just cut out the numbers that you need, and then put the decals on here. So I got a little bit of Solvaset on there. I got to let that dry, and then I'll go back and touch up the any gaps or the edges with a little bit of black paint. So it's not the most fun part of the process. It's pretty tedious, but one of the finishing touches here we're working on before we run this engine around. So here it is assembled, all back together, ready to run. I also redid the pilots on 208 to match. So I got rid of the brake details, the brake hoses and things on there, just like I did on 207. And now they match perfectly. So we're gonna lash them up here and run them around the layout.